My sister stole my millionaire fiancé 6 years ago. Then she showed up to our mother's funeral flashing his ring and called me pathetic and alone. So I introduced her to my husband. She didn't see that coming. But the part nobody tells you about moments like that is how quiet everything gets right before they happen. Like the whole world is holding its breath. The church smelled like lilies and old carpet. I stood by the front pew with my hands folded in front of me and watched people file in to pay their respects. Most of them I knew from my mother's years at the elementary school. Teachers, parents, a few kids who were now grown and had kids of their own. They came up to me one by one, squeezed my arm, said they were sorry. I thanked each of them in the same steady voice. I'd practiced it in the car on the way over. My best friend Marisol appeared at my elbow with a paper cup of water. You haven't drunk anything since breakfast. I'm fine. You say that like it's convincing. Her dark eyes searched my face. Do you want me to stay up here with you? I shook my head. Go sit down. I'm okay. She didn't move for a second. Then she squeezed my shoulder once, hard, and walked back to the third row where she'd been sitting with my husband's parents. I watched her go and felt the absence of her presence like a draught. The organ started playing something soft. I turned toward the casket at the front of the sanctuary. My mother had picked out the dress herself, navy blue, with tiny white flowers stitched at the collar. She'd told me once when we were going through her things after the diagnosis that she wanted to be buried in it. Not that black garbage everyone wears, and I'd laughed because my mother was the kind of woman who said things like that even when she was. The back doors of the church opened. I didn't turn around I heard the murmurs, felt the room's attention bend toward the entrance like a plant toward it. Then I heard the click of high heels on the hardwood, slow and my stomach. Danielle was walking down the center aisle on right arm, and the first thing I saw was it was impossible not. An oval diamond set in them, catching the stained glass light as she lifted her hand to tuck a strand of blonde hair behind. The gesture was casual. I'd seen her do it 100 times. I'd never seen it from this far away, with this many people. She was wearing a black dress that cost more than my car. Her makeup was flawless. Rick looked uncomfortable in his suit, his tie slightly tight, his eyes scanning the room like he was looking for the near exit. He saw me and his steps faltered early. Danielle noticed. She was smiling the smile she used cameras, lips closed, eyes bright, and she kept it on as they reached. The service passed. A eulogy. I talked about their laugh, about the way she kept every drawing my sister and I ever made in a shoebox, about how she'd called me 2 days before she died and asked me to water the African violet on the kitchen. My shake. After the service, everyone moved to the fellowship hall for coffees. I stood near the refreshment table, accepting hugs and silences, when Danielle materialized in front of me like she'd risen. Her voice was warm, honeyed. She reached out and forearm. That was such a beautiful eulogy. Loved it. Thanks. Kept my voice flat. I didn't pull my arm away, but I didn't in either. Her hand dropped. She shifted her weight, and the ring caught the flint. This is hard for you. Losing Mom and, well, you've always been alone, haven't you? Even when we were kids, you were always the... Her head, her expression softening into something that looked like pity. I just about you, that's all. You don't have anyone. It's sad, really. Pathetic, almost. I felt the words land like stones in my chest. I opened my mouth to respond, being polite and empty, the way I always did, when the fellowship hall door opened behind me. I need to turn around. I would know the sound of those footsteps anywhere. Heavy, a little hurried, the boots he wore on job sites scuffing linoleum. The room tension shifted again, but this time feel like judgment, felt like air. Sorry I'm late, Ethan said, and his voice was warm and a little breathless. I'd run from the parking lot. He came up beside me and rested his hand on my back. Just his fingertip barely there. But I felt it all. Shoes. Had a issue at the Henderson job. A concrete truck showed up wrong. Everything okay? I looked up at him. His hair was messy from the drive. His shirt still had a faint wall on the cuff. And he was looking at me like in the room. I felt something loosen in my hadn't known was tight. Turned back to Danielle, who was staring at Ethan with an expression I'd seen on her face before. Something between illusion and calculation. Like she was trying to solve a problem. Danielle, I said, and my voice was steady now, not practiced, just steady. Husband, Ethan. Smiled and held out his hand. Hey, nice to meet you. Told me a lot about you. Danielle didn't take his hand right away. Her eyes moved from Ethan's face to the hand on my back, to the scuffed boots, to the drywall on his cuff, and then back up to me. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. The ring on her left hand caught the light, but for the first time that day I was looking at it. The urn gurgled behind us. Someone laughed in the corner. I stood there with Ethan's hand on my neck and watched my sister's face, and for the first time in 6 years, I did not feel like I was losing. The studio smelled like wet soil and pencil shavings. I was on my knees in the back room, repotting a fern a client had dropped off 2 days ago when the front door chimed. I didn't look up. Be right there. Take your time. I'm not in a rush. My hands stilled in the dirt. I knew that voice. I would know it if I were deaf, if I were on the moon, if I were 6 feet under. I wiped my hands on my jeans and stood up. Danielle was standing in the middle of the showroom, turning slowly in a circle, taking in the shelves of ceramic planters, the drafting table by the window, the framed photos of finished gardens on the walls. Her heels clicked on the concrete floor. She was wearing a cream-colored sweater and tailored trousers, and she looked like she had never gotten dirt under her fingernails in her life. Nice little place, she said. It wasn't a question. What are you doing here, Danielle? Can't a sister come see her sister's shop? She smiled and wandered over to the drafting table, where I'd spread out blueprints for a backyard renovation in Land Park. She leaned over, one hand resting on the edge of the table, and the ring caught the afternoon light. Mom always said you'd do something with plants. I told her you'd probably end up working at a nursery. I was wrong. You have your own business. That's impressive. I felt the old familiar heat rise up the one that used to make me apologize for things I hadn't. Did you need? She straight. I wanted to talk about Mom's things. The house, Lee. She paused, choosing her words the way she chose, carefully, with an audience. I thought we could, for Mom's sake. She would have wanted us to. I stared at her. You showed up to her funeral flashing a 3-carat ring and called me pathetic and alone in front of Her smile. I was with you. There's a difference. There isn't. Second, something flickered her face. Irritation, maybe. Or the briefest flash of the girl she'd been at 16, slamming doors and screaming that I always got everything. Then it was gone, and she was... So, the house. I was thinking, since Rick and I have the space, and we've been talking about maybe getting a second home, I'd buy you out, of course. Fair market value. You wouldn't have it. I felt the dirt under my nails, the rough edge of the bench behind me. I thought about the house on Q Street, where I'd grown up, where my mother had tended a garden that wrapped around the backyard, where I'd hidden in the closet during months. I thought about the shoebox of drawings on bed. We should talk about that with a lawyer, I said. Not here. Not like this. Her jaw tightened, just slightly. You always have to make everything, don't you? Before I could, phone buzzed. Glanced at the screen, and shifted. Something private. Read. She slipped the phone to her pocket. I should go, she said. She started toward the door, turned back. You're Ethan. He's a builder. He'd just renovate. Ah. She nodded slowly, like he was filing this away. That's nice. Hands on. Grounded. She said the word like it meant something else. Tell him I said hi. I followed him on Instagram, by the way. I want to see his work. The door chimed as she left. I stood in the middle of my studio for a long time, listening to the sound of her heels beating across the parking lot. Then I walked over to the draft and picked up my phone. I had 3 text messages I didn't have saved. Who it was. The first one had come in yesterday, funeral. It's Rick. Hey, seeing you. Morning. I've thought a lot over the years. I don't think I ever properly apologized. The third, 10 minutes. Can we talk? Just us. No, I stared at the screen. The back room needed water. The blueprints on the table needed to be finalized by Friday. Outside, a truck rumbled down the street. I set the phone down and didn't reply. But I didn't delete the messages either. The call came on Thursday afternoon, while I was at a client's house in East Sacramento, measuring a backyard for a patio installation. I had the measuring tape stretched between 2 oak trees when my phone buzzed in my back pocket. I didn't recognize the number, but I answered anyway. Clara Carter. It's me. Danielle's voice was tight, like she was trying to keep it calm and failing. I've been trying to reach you for 2 days. I've been working. Right. Your garden stuff. There was a pause. I went by the house today. The Q Street house. I took some of Mom's things. The silverware set, the jewelry box, the painting of the lake that was above the fireplace. I figured you wouldn't want them. You never cared about that kind of stuff. My hand tightened around the measuring tape. The oak tree's bark was rough against my palm. You went into the house without me? The realtor gave me a key. I'm the executor. You're not the executor. Mom's will says we're co-executors. We're supposed to make decisions together. She laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. Oh, come on, Clara. When have we ever made a decision together? You've always just done whatever you wanted and left me to deal with the rest. That's not true, and you know what? Her voice dropped, became conspiratorial, like we were sharing a secret instead of having a fight. Look, Rick said he can have the silver appraised. It's probably worth something. And the jewelry. Mom had that pearl necklace, remember? I can sell it and split the money with you. 50. That's right. I closed my eyes. I thought about the pearl necklace. My mother had worn it to my high school graduation, to Danielle's wedding, to every Sunday church service for as long as I could. I thought about the painting of Lake, which my mother had bought on a trip to Lake Tahoe the summer after my father died, when it was just the three of us in a rented cabin, eating cereal for dinner and watching old movies on a portable DVD. Oh. There was a silence on their end. What? No, you're not going to sell my things. You're not going to take anything else from the house, and you're not going to make decisions about the estate without me. We're going to sit down together with a lawyer and we're going to go through fairly. Her voice cold. You don't get to tell what to do. You never have. You think because you have your little business and your contractor husband that you're better than me now? You think you can just... I'm not better than you, Danielle. I'm just not going to let you walk all over me anymore. Not about Mom's things. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. Then she said, "You're this up." The measuring tape was still stretched between the trees, and the client, an older woman named Mrs. Chen, was watching me from the back porch with a concern. I gave her a thumbs up, a smile. It felt like my That night, Ethan and I were sitting after dinner, him going through invoices on his laptop, me sketching a planting plan on a legal pad, when he threw her down. Hey, I looked up, holding my phone. I'd left the coffee table. Face up, and his was grim. Who's Rick Holloway? And why is he texting you at 9 o'clock at night saying he misses the way you used to laugh? I felt the blood drain from my face. Reached for the phone. But he hit just out of reach, not to be cruel, but because he... How long has this been going on? Since the funeral. He texted me after, and then again. Clara. Voice was quiet, but it had heard. There are messages here. 12. From a guy who your fiancé, your sister stole. Who to your sister? You didn't tell me. I was going to handle it. Handle it by ignoring it? He set the phone between us. Clara, I love you. I trust you. But this is not nothing. He's not just texting you to catch up. He's trying to get in your head. I stared at the phone. The screen had gone dark, but I could still my mind. About you a lot. I never properly apologized. Can we talk us? I thought about Danielle on the phone that afternoon. Regret this. I thought about the flashing in the church light, about Danielle adding Ethan on Instagram, about the way she'd always held it fair. I know, I said. I held it in both hands. I know it's not nothing, and I'm sorry I didn't tell you. I wanted to deal with it myself. I want it to be your problem. He shifted closer and put his arm around me. Your problems are my problems. That's kind of the whole. I leaned into him. I could smell sawed laundry detergent on his shirt, and it grounded me, nothing else could. I said again, but this time it wasn't an excuse. I promise. I'll make it stop. The top of my head. Okay, but if he doesn't stop, I'm having a conversation with, and it won't be this one. I almost smiled. Then I looked at the dark screen, and thought about Dan. Cold and final. You're going to regret this. I had a feeling she meant it. The lawyer's office was on the 12th floor of a glass building downtown, and the windows looked out over the Sacramento skyline, flat, brown, spread out under a sky so pale it was almost white. I sat across from a woman named Patricia Liang, who had handled my mother's estate planning for the last 15 years, and tried not to fidget. Ethan was beside me, his hand resting on my knee under the table. He'd taken the morning off work, and he was wearing a clean flannel shirt instead of his usual work clothes, like he'd dressed up for the occasion. I'd told him he didn't need to come. He'd looked at me and said, "Yeah, I do," and that had been the end of it. Patricia opened a manila folder and slid a single envelope across the desk. It was cream-colored, slightly thick, and my name was written on the front in my mother's handwriting. Loopy, a little shaky, the way it had gotten in the last year when the pain medication made her hands tremor. Your mother asked me to give this to you after she passed, Patricia said. She was very specific. Not at the funeral. Not with family present, just you. She said if you wanted someone with you, that was your choice. But the letter was for you. I stared at the envelope. My mother's handwriting. I hadn't seen it in months. She'd stopped writing cards and letters when her hands got too bad. had switched to voice to text on her phone, which she hated because it always misspelled Danielle's. My voice. Can I open it? Of course. Take you. I slid my finger under the map. The paper inside was thick, stationery with a faint floral. My mother had bought a box of it at a garage sale 10 years ago and had been using it ever since. One sheet at a time, like it was The letter was 3 pages, front back, and the handwriting got shakier as it went, like she'd written it in one sitting and had run out of. I started. My dearest, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and I'm sorry for a lot. But most of all, I'm sorry for what I'm about to, because I should have told you when I was alive. I was a coward. I've been a coward about this for 6 years, and I can't take my grip on the paper. Ethan's hand on my knee presently, a reminder that you remember when you and Rick got. You were so happy. I'd never seen like that. You went to dinner, and he held your hand on the table, and I thought, finally, she's got someone. Then Dan. I told you it was a bad idea. Clara, you know how. But you said she had nowhere else to go, and you've always had a spot for her, even when she. You take at me that way. We both wanted to believe. Here's what. Came to see me. This was about a month before you found out. He showed up at my house one afternoon. He said Danielle had coming on to him, flirting, saying things. He said he didn't know what to do, because your sister, and he didn't want those problems. He asked me what. The all very quiet. I could hear the hum of the lights, the distant sound of a print and slow, steadying beside me, reading. Told him, Richard, a man should be with the woman who made. I said Danielle him, and that you were always so independent, so self-sufficient, that maybe he felt necessary with you. I told him that if he was having doubts, I pushed him toward Clara. I told you your sister. I did that. And then when you found out, everything fell apart. I sat with you while you cried, and I knew it wasn't your fault, that Rick was a fool. Danielle was selfish, and all the time I knew I had a scale. I knew. Tears were running down my face, but I didn't wipe them. I couldn't. Shaking too hard. Excuse. I can tell you that Danielle was all needed me more. That she was the way you never were. That I thought if she had Rick, she'd be okay and you'd be fine, always strong. But that's not an excuse. That's just me being a mother who loved daughter more than the other. You were always the Clara. Even when you were little, even after your dad died, you were the one who got up and made breakfast and got Danielle ready for school and did like everything was fine. I leaned on you. I shouldn't have. You were a child, and I made you my partner. And then I chose Danielle anyway because she needed me to. I want you to know. It wasn't you. You didn't lose Rick because you weren't enough. You lost him because I told him to leave. And I've carried that every day for 6 years, sorry. I love you, Clara. One day you can forgive me. I hope even more that you can forgive yourself. Mom down on the desk. My hands were still shaking. I couldn't breathe. It was like someone had reached inside my chest and rearranged everything. All the grief. All the shame. All the years telling myself I wasn't enough. That I'd driven Rick away. That if I'd been prettier or funnier or more like Danielle, he would have stayed. I doubt none of it was true. None of it. I stood up. The chair scraped against the floor. Ethan stood up too. He was afraid I need air. I walked toward the door, and my belonged to someone else. Called after me, but I didn't stop. I pushed through the office door, down the hallway, into the stairwell, and stood on the landing, my hands on the cold, and I cried. Not the quiet, controlled crying I'd done, the ugly kind. The kind that makes your shoulders shake your breath. Ethan found me there. He didn't say anything. He just wrapped his arms around me from behind and held me while I cried, rested on the top of my head. And I beating against my back, steady and sure. We stayed like that for a long time. When I finally pulled away, my face was swollen and my eyes were red, and I didn't care. I was on my sleeve and looked at Ethan. She pushed him, I said. My voice was raw. My mother pushed Rick toward Nell. She told him to choose her. 6 years. 6 years I thought it was me. His jaw tightened. Clara, don't say you're sorry. I didn't do it. Took a shaky breath. I need to go home. I need to be alone for a little while. Not alone, Okay. Go home. We drove back in silence. I held the letter in my lap, and stared at it the whole way. When we pulled into the Ethan reached over my hand. Whatever you need, he he said. I'm here, I nodded. I got out of the truck and walked into the house. I was halfway down the hallway when my phone started ringing. I looked at the screen, yell. I stared at the phone. It rang 3 more times, then voicemail. A text came immediately. We need to talk, now. No, Rick has been texting you. I saw his phone. What the hell is wrong? I set the phone down on the kitchen. The letter was still in. I looked from the letter to the phone, and I felt something shift inside me. Something that had been broken for 6 years. Something that was into a shape I didn't recognize. The front door opened. Ethan walked in, and stopped when he saw my face. Clara? I picked up the phone. Danielle had sent another text. Over. Tonight. Looked at Ethan. She's on her way. The doorbell rang at 9:47. I knew the exact time because I'd been staring at the microwave clock since Danielle's last text, watching the numbers tick forward like a countdown. Ethan was standing in the kitchen, his arms crossed, his face like stone. I'll get it, I said. Clara, I've got this. I walked to the front door and opened it. Danielle was standing on the porch in the same cream sweater she'd worn to the studio, but it was wrinkled now, like she'd put it on in a hurry. Her makeup was smudged. She'd been crying or screaming or both. Her hair was half up, half down, and she was holding her phone so tight her knuckles were white. How could you? Her voice cracked. How could you do this to me? After everything. After Mom. You have to have everything, don't you? You couldn't just let me have him. I stood in the doorway and didn't move. He's been texting me, Danielle. Not the other way around. That's not the point. The point is you didn't tell me. You didn't tell Rick to stop. You just let him. I didn't let him do anything. I haven't replied to a single message. She left, and it was a wild, desperate sound. Oh, sure, Little Miss Perfect. Little Miss, I would never. You know what your problem is? You've always acted like you're too good for everything. Too good for Rick, too good for Mom's things, too good. And then you turn around. My voice was it, but it cut through her rant like a knife through. I didn't steal your. You stole mine 6 ago. In my apartment, in my bed. And I have spent every day since then trying to be okay with it. I didn't text Rick. I didn't call him. I didn't go for him. He found me. And if he's unhappy with you, that's not my fault. That's yours. Crumpled. For a second, she looked like the 16-year-old she'd been. The one who would cry after a fight and expect everyone to forgive her because she was the youngest. Because she needed. I just won, she whispered. I wanted him to be with me. Win. I felt something soften in my chest, and I hated it. I hated that I could still feel sorry for this woman, that after everything, a part of me still wanted to comfort her. You didn't win, Danielle, I said, and neither did I. Both lost. But I'm done losing. I'm going to talk to Rick, and I'm going to tell him to leave me alone. And then this is over. For good, she stared at me. You're going to talk alone? Yes, he doesn't listen. And I'll block his number. If he shows up here, I'll with him. I glanced over at Ethan, who was sitting in the kitchen, and back at Danielle. Go home, Danielle. You and Rick need to figure out your marriage. It's not my problem. She opened her mouth like she was going to say something else, and she closed it. She turned and walked down the porch steps, her heel clicking on the concrete, her car. The headlight swept across the front yard and out of the driveway, gone. I closed the door against it. Ethan was in front of me in 2 steps, hands on my shoulders. Are you okay? I will be. I took a breath. I need to meet with Rick. Tomorrow. Somewhere public. To tell him to stop. His jaw tightened. I don't like it. I know. But I need to do it. I need to look him in the eye and say it. If I just block him, he'll find another way. He'll show up here, or at the studio, or at Mom. I need to end properly. He did my face for a long. Then he nodded. Okay, but I'm picking the place, and I'm sitting at the next table. You won't even know I'm there. Deal. We met at a coffee shop street the next afternoon. A busy place with big windows and a constant stream of remote workers. Rick was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table in front of him. He stood up when he saw me. Did something complicated. Grief. Guilt. Might have been hope. Clara, thanks for coming. Sit down. The chair across from him. I didn't order anything. I didn't have to stay long. Rick, I'm going once and then I'm going to leave. Stop texting me. Stop trying to contact me. I'm married. I'm happy. And whatever you think you feel for me, it's not real. It's guilt. You feel about what happened 6 years ago. And you're trying to make yourself feel better by pretending to have something. But we can't. Then. And we can't now. His face fell. Clara, that's not. It is. And you know it. I stood up. You need to go home and work on your marriage. Or get divorced, whatever. But leave me out of it. Last time we're going to talk about this. I walked out without looking back. A bell above the door jingled behind me. The afternoon sun was bright, and I squinted against it as I walked to my car. I did see the woman sitting by the window, her phone raised, camera shutter clicking twice. I didn't see Danielle's best friend, Lila, of me walking away from her table. But Lila saw me, and Lila photoed to Danielle with a "It's worth thought." Met in public. She left, but he watched her go the whole time. I was halfway home, buzzed. I didn't check it. I was thinking about my mother's letter. Words, "It wasn't you." About how 6 years of shame could dissolve in a single afternoon. You were brave enough to say the truth out loud. I didn't know it was already on its way to becoming a weapon. The memorial gathering was Danielle's idea. She'd texted the family group chat, an aunt in Fresno, a cousin in Portland, my mother's former co-workers, a handful of church friends, and said we should all get together at the Q Street house to celebrate Mom's life properly and sort through her things together. I'd known immediately what it was, a trap. Danielle wanted an audience. I'd considered not going. Ethan had offered to call the whole thing off, to say we were busy, to make up an excuse. But I'd shaken my head. If I don't go, she wins. She'll tell everyone I'm avoiding them because I'm guilty of something. I'm not guilty of anything. I'm going. Ethan had looked at me for a long time. Then he'd said, "Okay, but I'm driving. And I'm not leaving your side." The house on Q Street smelled like lemon pledge and old books. I'd been there once since the funeral, with the realtor, to walk through and take inventory. And it had felt strange then, like visiting a set where someone else was playing my family. Now, with 20 people milling around the living room and kitchen, it felt worse, like a party in a graveyard. Danielle was in the kitchen, holding court. She had a glass of white wine in one hand and was gesturing broadly with the other, telling a story about my mother that I didn't recognize. Something about a trip to Europe, about how Mom had always been so adventurous. My mother had never left the country. I stood by the fireplace and watched, and waited. I didn't have to wait. Danielle spotted me across the room. Her smile widened, sharpened, became something else. She set down her wine glass and walked, and the people near, the aunt from Fresno, the cousin from Portland, 2 of my mother's former co-workers, instinctively like they could feel what was coming. "Clara," her voice was bright, too bright, the way it got when she was about to do something she'd been wrong. "I'm so glad you came. I was worried you might not show up. Given recent events, I kept my neutral." "What reasons?" It was a performative sound, and several people in the room took. "Oh, don't play, Clara. Everyone here knows you've been seeing Rick behind back, meeting him in coffee shops, texting him. 6 years wasn't enough for you, was it? You had to try to..." A murmur through the room. The aunt from Fresno put her hand in her mouth. The cousin from Portland looked from me to Danielle and back again, clearly uncertain. I felt Ethan shift beside me, his hand finding the... "Look at him, Danielle. I didn't meet Rick behind your back," I said. My voice was steady, louder than I usually spoke, because I needed everyone for me. I met him because he'd been texting 2 weeks. 12 messages, asking to see me, apologizing 6 years ago, saying he missed me. I met him in a public coffee shop to tell him to see. That's what happened. Face flushed. That's what Lila saw. She saw you 2 together. Lila saw me walking away from him. Because I left. Because I told him to leave me out. I pulled my phone out of my pocket, dreading this moment, but I'd also been preparing for it. I'd screenshot every message Rick had sent me, every single one, because a part of me had always known Danielle would this. "You want to see the messages? Here, I'll show everyone." I held up the phone. The screen was bright, and the text messages were large enough that the people could read them. I scrolled slowly, one message at a time. "Seeing you. Old times. I've thought about... I don't think I apologized. Can we talk? Just us. No drama." I laugh. "I'm not happy, Clara. A long time." Silent. The aunt from Fresno's was still over her mouth. Now her eyes were wide. The cousin from Portland staring at Danielle. My mother's former co-workers were exchanging looks that words couldn't. Danielle's face to white. You kept these?" Them like some kind of... like someone who knew you'd try to turn this around on me? "Yes," I lowered the phone. "Want any of this, Danielle? I didn't ask for Rick to text me. I didn't ask for you to show up at my studio and demand Mom's things. I didn't ask for you to call me pathetic and alone at our mother's funeral. I just wanted to grieve. In peace. But you couldn't let me do that, could you? You had to make it about you. Make it about you." Tears were running down her face now, but they weren't the calculated tears she used to get what she wanted. These are ugly and desperate. My husband, she whispers, to want me. Then maybe you should. Why he doesn't, I said. Instead of asking, the front door opened. Rick was standing in the doorway, holding a bouquet of flowers, their favorite, lilies, and he walked into a courtroom. He saw Daniel's, saw my phone, saw pairs of eyes turned toward him, in his hand. Rick, Dan said, voice was small. Tell them she's been chasing you. Looked at me. Danielle. Then at the floor. I'm sorry, he said. And then at her. She's telling the truth. All of it, I texted her. Shouldn't have. I'm sorry. The silence, that was the thing I'd ever heard. Danielle looked at Rick. Then at me. Then at the flowers in his hand. Lilies. My mother's favorite. The same had filled the church 2 weeks ago, and something in her face broke. Not the formative break she used to be, but the real kind, the kind that doesn't heal clean. She passed him, out, and didn't look back. I stood in the living room of my childhood home, surrounded by people who had just watched my family implode, and I felt Ethan's hand on my back, steady and warm. I didn't triumphant. I feel vindicated. I felt tired in a way that went deeper any of it. I looked at Rick, who was still standing in the doorway with the lilies in him, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. You, I said. Both you should go. This was my mother's house, and I'd like to be in it without all of this. He nodded, lilies on the entryway table, and left. The door hit him. The room was still quiet. Then the aunt from Fresno came over and put her arm around me, and the Caitlin said, I had no idea. And my mother's former co-worker, named Helen, with her for 20 years. Your mother, complicated woman, she loved you, eh? Looked at Helen. I thought about the letter, I pushed him toward her, I loved one daughter. And I nodded. I know, I said. I'm starting to know. A month later, the camellia bush arrived in a black plastic pot from a nursery up in Placerville. I'd ordered it the week after the memorial, my mother's favorite, a Kramer Supreme, with dark red blooms that came out in winter and lasted for months. I'd read somewhere that camellias could live for 100 years if you planted them right. I liked that idea. Ethan dug the hole in the backyard, near the fence where the afternoon sun came through the oak tree in soft, dappled patches. It was a Saturday in late September, and the air was still warm, but there was a crispness to it that meant fall was coming. I watched him dig, his shirt sticking to his back, and thought about how I used to imagine this moment differently, how I'd pictured myself planting something with Rick, in a big house with a pool and a gardener who did the actual digging. That life had never existed. It had been a story Danielle had told, and I'd almost believed it. Hand me that shovel, Ethan said, and I handed it to him. He widened the hole, set the camellia in, and started filling it back in with soil. You want to do the honors? I took the watering can from the porch and poured it slowly around the base of the bush. The water sank into the dirt, dark and rich, and the leaves glistened. I stood up and wiped my hands on my jeans. Mom had one just like this, I said. At the Q Street house. By the back door, she used to talk. I thought it was weird when I was a kid. Maybe she was just practicing for when she'd have to talk to you, Ethan. And I laughed. It was a real laugh. Not the polite one I used with clients or the tight one I'd used at the funeral. It came from somewhere deep and loose, and it surprised me. We'd settled the estate that week. The Q Street house had sold to a young couple with a toddler and a golden retriever, and the closing had been quick and Danielle hadn't shown up to sign the papers. Her lawyer had. I'd kept the shoebox of drawings, the pearl necklace, and the painting of. Danielle had taken the silver and the jewelry box and most of the. We hadn't spoken since the. Rick had filed for divorce 2 weeks. I'd heard about it from the aunt, who heard about it from a friend of a friend who knew Rick's. The papers cited irreconcilable differences. I didn't feel any about it. Not satisfaction, not pity, not even curiosity. It was just news. Like a story about someone I. Marisol showed up that evening with a pizza and a bottle, and the 3 of us sat on the back porch eating off paper plates because I'd forgotten to do. The camellia bush was visible from the porch, a dark green shape against the fence, and I kept glancing at it like I expected it to. So, Marisol said, taking a bite of pepper pizza. How really? Don't give me that I'm fine crap. I thought about the letter, about the funeral, about Danielle's face when Rick said she's. I thought about the 6 years I'd spent carrying something that wasn't in to carry, about the way shame had lived in my body like second skin, about the morning I'd read the letter, really realized, that none of it fault. I'm good. And then, because Marisol was my best friend and. Perfect. Some days I think about it, About her. What she did. But it doesn't hurt the way it used to. It's more like a scar. You know? You see it. Remember how you got it. But it doesn't bleed anymore. Marisol nodded slowly. That's growth, bitch. I'm proud of you. I laughed again. Ethan reached over and squeezed my knee, and I used to think, I said, looking at the backyard, at the camellia bush in the fading light, that I had happier than Danielle. That if mine was better than hers, then she was wrong about me, then I'd win. But that's not how it works. Winning is about being better than her. It's about not needing her to be wrong, me to be right. I paused. Crickets had started up, and somewhere in the night a dog was barking, and the sky was turning that deep purple color before dark. I spent years being angry at her, I said, and it turns out I was angry at the wrong person. Or at least not only her. I was angry at Mom, I was angry at Rick, but most of all, I was angry at myself. His hand tightened around mine. Deserved it. I know that now. I smiled, and it was mine. It took me long enough. Marisol finished her wine and porch rail. Your mom would say right now, if she were here. I shook my head. She'd say, Clara, stop overthinking everything and before it gets cold. I laughed, and this time it was loud enough that the dog stopped barking. I picked a pizza and took a bite, and it was too hot, and the cheese stretched, and I had to wipe back of my hand. After Marisol left, Ethan and I sat on the porch for longer, not talking, just listening to the crickets and the distant hum of the highway. The camellia bush was a dark shape now, almost invisible against the fence, but I knew her. I'd planned. It was mine. I thought about my mother's letter, the last line. I hope you can forgive were never your fault. I forgive, I said quietly, to the bush, the dark, to my mother, to the girl I'd been 6 years. I forgive all of it. Ethan put his arm around, and I leaned into him, and the summer air was warm on my face, and somewhere a car door closed, and the world kept turning, and I, Clara Carter, formerly Bennett, formerly alone, for things I wasn't anymore, sat on my back porch with my husband's arm around me, camellia bush in the ground, and felt, for the first time in as long as I could remember, completely and unshakably at home.